Most of you probably know that Eric Trump is not exactly the one we typically refer to as the smart one, but he even outdid himself in a completely wacky interview on ABC on Sunday with Jonathan Karl. Now, Eric Trump was interviewed, I guess, as a surrogate of the Trump administration or a surrogate of the Trump campaign, I think it better said. Fine. But as you watch this, I want you to understand and consider that the importance of beating Trump this election, this November, it's not just about preventing Trump from being president for another 4 years so that the country doesn't go completely off a cliff. Another reason why we must defeat Trump this November is that if we don't, in 2024, I guarantee it, either Eric or Don Jr. or Ivanka are going to have a leg up in the Republican primary for president in 2024. At some point, one of them runs. And I believe that if Trump gets another 4 years, you will see at least the possibility of an attempt at one of his kids running. And this interview should be a reminder as to why we need to stop that at absolutely all costs. We know that the Republican electorate is really ignorant. They aren't going to stop the Trump kids. So we need to prevent them from getting a running start by Trump getting another 4 years in November. So let's get into the clips. Eric Trump on This Week. Again, he's supposedly just a businessman at this point, but he's there as a surrogate of the Trump campaign. Doesn't really make sense, but he's there and he is mad that the media will accurately report when Trump does these mass rallies, it risks spreading the virus. Take a look at this.
I mean, they took every precaution. Again, temperature checks, masks, they were outside. It was a beautiful event.
Sure.
But why is it that it's only Trump events that are called out? Why are these protests that we see all over the place? I see them in New York. I see them in Portland. I see them in Seattle. I see them everywhere. Antifa is going wild, and no one ever talks about them wearing masks. But yet a beautiful protest by African Americans and Hispanic Americans in front of the White House to support our incredible men and women in law enforcement becomes the subject of an ABC show at 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I mean, it's...
Well, Eric, to be clear,
I've lost a lot of faith in the media, John. I really have.
Well, Eric, to be clear, I'm not criticizing and I'm reporting the fact.
He's totally incoherent. What is he even talking about? These mass events do have the potential to be super spreader events, period. And the fact that the media is covering them as such is because the media is doing a good job. Of course, he's not pleased with it. Eric Trump then admits that Trump is having rallies at the White House. Now, this is problematic for two reasons. Trump has been playing coy and saying these are peaceful protests because if you call it a protest, it's okay. If you call it a rally, it's a problem. But it's also a problem because you're not supposed to use the White House for political campaigning. And by calling it a rally, Eric Trump, again, nobody said, maybe he says, I've never claimed Eric Trump is the smart one, but he's admitting that these are rallies at the White House.
Everybody, and you know this, you report from there every single day. Everybody that goes within, 500 yards of the White House is tested every single day. And it's a little bit of a different apparatus, in that machine. But again, I find the hypocrisy so crazy. I mean, you go out there and you see these massive riots and protests in these liberal-run cities, and no one's wearing masks, and no one cares. No one cares. The media doesn't talk about them. I mean, how many have we had in New York, and how many have we had in Chicago, and all these things? And the media never talks about that. But again, when you have a peaceful Trump, rally at the White House in support of law enforcement by African Americans, CNN cuts away. MSNBC cuts away from those events. They don't.
Truly the rantings of someone completely disconnected from reality. He really seems to think that he and his family are just the biggest victims out there. They're martyrs. They've agreed to be the first family despite what would be best for them in order to just make things better for everybody, and everybody attacks them. Of course, the big differences include that everyone is wearing masks at the various protests. That's why they don't seem to have spread the virus. Eric Trump, who is clearly not an expert in any of these matters, then goes on to talk about Donald Trump taking a vaccine. Now, it's false that, as far as we know, Trump didn't get a vaccine during his treatment for coronavirus. He got medications, but not vaccines. And certainly Donald Trump has done nothing in terms of creating a vaccine. But Eric Trump bizarrely says here, Donald Trump took a vaccine. And the interviewer, Jonathan Karl, can't believe what he's hearing. Take a listen to this.
The guy sounded 100%. It was amazing. It actually probably goes to speak to how good some of these vaccines that are being created are. And what my father's done on the vaccine front, no one could have done. No one could have done. I mean, literally, Biden was calling my father xenophobic for shutting down America from travel to China. I mean, and the virus came from China. My father literally started day one creating this vaccine. He worked to push this vaccine, and now my father just took it, and you see how well he got over it.
Wait, can you?
I think it's an inspiration. I think as Americans, John, we should be very proud of that.
Can you clarify that? You said your father just took a vaccine?
Meaning when he was in Walter Reed, the medicines that he was taking, and
the
on
therapeutics.
Friday, he felt horrible. And on Saturday, again, I spoke to the man 3 times on Saturday, and he sounded tremendous. And I think it goes to show the power of medicine and in this country, and how far that we've come on COVID in the last 6-7 months.
Vaccines cured my dad, which my dad created, despite Joe Biden being xenophobic. What? My father took a vaccine. Huh? What? Doesn't make any sense. Is Eric Trump now? There's one idea, which is Eric Trump let slip that Trump has received a vaccine, but they're not going public. I just think Eric Trump's dumb. I don't think he's letting anything slip here. Eric Trump then was asked about the fact that Donald Trump called Kamala Harris a monster, and Eric Trump, of course, defends it. This is funny.
Vice President Pence, when he debated Kamala Harris, he said it was a privilege to be on the stage with her, recognized her history-making pick as Biden's running mate. And then the next day, your father said that she was a monster. Why?
Yeah.
How is Kamala Harris a monster? Why did he say that?
Well, I think there are a lot of the stances that she takes that are just, they're mind-boggling to me. I mean, she's come out and she's called to abolish law enforcement. She's, compared members of ICE to the KKK in a congressional hearing. She wants to take away 180 million private health care plans in this country. Last week, she was coming out talking about how she wanted to limit the amount of red meat that Americans could eat. I mean,
Eric, political differences, and I think you've mischaracterized her positions in that litany, but political differences are one thing. A monster? You're calling the Democratic vice presidential nominee a monster, your father did? How is that? I mean, I don't get it.
John, you're also dealing with a person who's willing to lie every single day. It's amazing. One day, they're calling for let's Kamala Harris and frankly Joe Biden. But
I love that when Eric Trump says you're dealing with someone who's willing to lie every day, Jonathan Karl says, who? It's a completely Kafkaesque moment. I don't know that we've ever used the term Kafkaesque on this program before. It is a completely surreal Kafkaesque moment. When Eric says you're dealing with someone who's willing to lie every day, Jonathan Karl is confused because there's no bigger liar in politics right now than Donald Trump. I guess Eric was talking about Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, but a completely wild moment. Also, he's lying by saying Kamala wants to abolish police. That's hilarious. She doesn't. In fact, some people on the left don't like Kamala because she doesn't want to abolish police. She doesn't want to take anybody's health care. And then Eric Trump ends this interview, which didn't go well, claiming that it's a lie that we know who all of Donald Trump's creditors are. And you can tell he's particularly triggered by this one because he starts speed talking and making even less sense than he had been making throughout the interview.
The media has become the activist arm for the Democratic Party.
Eric,
nothing's fair.
Eric, we're asking legitimate questions. One last one. The New York Times report also said that the president owes some $400 million. Don't the American people have a right to know who he is indebted to, who the president of the United States owes money to? Can you clarify that for us?
John, it's in his financial disclosures. You know exactly who the money's owed to. That's another Democratic talking point that you know exactly who the money's owed to. My father's
I don't
billions of dollars. And on a proportion of his net worth, my father has very, very, very low leverage. In fact, the New York Times, if you want to bring them into this, they came out and said that the other day. If you own buildings, if you own real estate, you carry some debt. That's what developers do. That's what business owners do. They carry some debt. Now, as a proportion of his net worth, it's incredibly low. We have a phenomenal company, but there's nothing new about that. And by the way, it's the same debt that he got elected on. And it's all fully disclosed in his financial disclosure forms with the United States government that you have access to.
Eric, thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time on this Sunday morning. Thank you.
We have a phenomenal company, he says, that lost money so that we could get tax breaks. But it's a great company. It just happens to be in direct conflict with what we learn about the profitability of the company through the bombshell New York Times tax report, which said the business actually was a disaster many years. Painful to listen to. And again, he's there, Eric Trump is, as a surrogate for the campaign, although he supposedly has no role in anything government or campaign related. He's merely an independent businessman. Can you make any more sense out of it than I can? And do you agree with me that of the three adult Trump children, Ivanka, Don Jr., and Eric's by far the worst in these interviews? Let me know if you agree, disagree. One of our sponsors today is Lucy, and they are giving my audience 20% off. Lucy is a company founded by Caltech scientists with only one mission, which is to help people quit smoking and vaping by offering a clean, affordable nicotine alternative. Now, many of you know, you've heard the stories. I've known several people in my life who have struggled with quitting smoking. I've seen how difficult it can be. And nicotine alternatives can be hugely helpful. Lucy offers a nicotine gum in 3 flavors: wintergreen, cinnamon, and pomegranate. They also have lozenges, which come in cherry ice flavor. Lucy is affordable. It'll ship right to your door. You don't have to go out to the store. Shipping is always free. You can buy single boxes or save with a subscription. It's the year 2020. It's time to throw the cigarettes away and get rid of the vape. And Lucy can make it easier. You'll find a ton of excellent reviews online from countless people who have used Lucy to quit smoking and vaping. Go check them out at lucy.co. I've put the link right underneath this video, and you'll get 20% off when you use the coupon code Pakman. And just a quick disclaimer, I'm required to give: these products contain nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.